Companies are laying people off left and right. There's so many people who need to get hired. And so this is where your LinkedIn account has so much potential. And it's not just about a LinkedIn account. It's about knowing how to open opportunities for yourself through your professional brand. Hey there, welcome back. And in fact, welcome to episode 100. Thank you so much for the 20,000 downloads that we have just reached. I am so excited to celebrate with you. So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know that you came from the podcast because I love hearing from you. And of course, as always, I'm happy to do a LinkedIn review for you or just connect and help in any way that I can. Now, for today, for this episode number 100, we are going to talk about the 10 things that hiring managers and recruiters look for when reviewing your resume and when deciding if they're going to actually give you a call back. Now, after reviewing and revising and writing countless and countless of resumes and really developing countless brands from scratch, I feel and I see the same things over and over and over again. And hiring leaders and recruiters have a lot of pet peeves that we want to avoid, but they also have a lot of green flags they're looking for. And so I'm going to show you the top 10 things you want to put on your resume to make sure that it's a green flag and what to swap out if there's something that isn't so good, what to put in instead. Now, this is going to include a major leak in most professional brands. And I have a feeling that if you are one of the 97 people who I see this situation with when I do, reviews of brands and materials for the career search, typically 97 folks out of a group of 100, 97 are missing this really, really important thing. So I'm going to leave that for the very, very end because I do want to get on my soapbox for just a little bit and tell you all about that. Maybe you're one of the 3 people out of 100, but if you're one of the 97 folks, then this is going to be really, really helpful. Now, every one of these 10 resume swaps or brand swaps reinforce one or more of these 3 main principles. Number one, keep it simple. Your resume is a decision making document. It is not a research document. And it's also not a kind of like a career memoir. Oftentimes I see it as if it's a career memoir, as if it's a CV, but it's actually, in the US anyway, a decision making document. Number two, the second principle is you want to avoid all friction. So, number one, make it simple. Number two, avoid all friction. This means anticipate and answer any questions that may come up for the hiring leader before they come up, because when they're looking at your resume, they can't actually ask you any questions. So, you want to anticipate that and you want your brand, whether it's your resume, your LinkedIn, your cover letter, etc., you want your brand to be a self-standing set of documents where all questions are answered as much as possible without having to contact you or pull you into an interview. Now, number three, the third principle is cut the clutter. So you want to delete anything that it can apply to anyone. Now, that may not make too much sense right now, but delete anything that can apply to anyone. If you have a phrase in your resume that an intern or a high schooler or a college graduate can share on their resume, then it's not specific enough. So you want to make sure that all of the bullets, all of the phrases, and even down to some of the keywords potentially, you want to make sure that they really apply so specifically to you that no one else can use them, or at least not anyone else that doesn't have your experience. Okay, with that in mind, keep it simple, avoid all friction, and cut the clutter. We're going to get into our 10 points. So, point number one. Please, 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 if you see an adjective, you see an adverb, 9 out of 10 times, 99 out of 100 even, take it out. Anytime you see an adjective or an adverb, take it out. And that's because you want to swap these for the actual evidence that they represent. So if you say something like, let me think of one, data driven. Data driven is technically an adjective, maybe an adverb. I'll have to look to give you the exact definition, but neither here nor there. Adjective or adverb, take it out. Swap it for the evidence. If you say you're data driven, that tells me that you have some golden information right underneath the layers there. You want to find out, when did I make data driven decisions? What data did I use? How many records? How did I analyze it? Did I have a method of analysis? How did that data driven decision result in additional revenue, time saved, cost cut, etc. So when you hear those words, data driven, um, passionate in, right? Passionate is one of those cliche words that, hiring leaders kind of cringe when they see it. So if you have the word passionate in your resume, go ahead now and just take it out. So again, adjectives and adverbs, we're swapping those for evidence. Before we move into number two, I'm going to tell you some of the most common perpetrators to look for. Number one, the word successfully. So instead of successfully completed XYZ, you're going to share exactly how successful. Words like consistently. Instead of saying consistently handled or consistently completed, consistently resolved, you're going to share the frequency. Is this once a week? Is this daily? Is this multiple times daily? How many times annually? Final one, efficiently. Efficiently and effectively are two words that they're always on resumes. But what you can do is swap that out and instead share time saved, resources saved, money saved, or maybe it means efficiently in the sense that you use the same number of resources, but you made more revenue, or you got done with something a little bit faster. That's how you can show efficiency. Now, is it the worst thing in the world to have the word efficiently in your resume? Not really. But what I'm looking for is how can we make your resume go from good to better? So, the best thing to do, adjectives, adverbs, take them out and instead look for the layer underneath, the gold, the metric that's underneath that. Now, you can keep a few very, very specific adjectives and adverbs. We talked about data driven and results driven. Can you have it on there? If you don't have very specific data, or if your data is not highly compelling, then maybe, right? There's a black and a white, and then there's a little bit of gray in between, right? So maybe, but if I were you, I really would replace that data driven with something that's more concrete. Now, another one that I see often is independently. You independently did XYZ, and that's perfectly fine. Why is that one okay and the others not? You might be like, okay, Patricia, seriously? Like, you can't just pick which adverbs are good and which ones are not good. The reason why independently to me is a good adverb is because it's specific enough that it says something about your bullet. It says it was you and nobody else, as opposed to successfully is very subjective. So it's really hard to know what successful is. A middle schooler, a high schooler, a college student can be successful at doing something, and you can be successful at doing something in your work, but it's going to look very different. But independently is a word that is highly specific, and it says, I didn't do it with the C suite. I didn't do it with my peers. I didn't do it, with other cross functional leaders. I did this independently. Okay, last one, unprecedented. Unprecedented is an adjective that is, again, highly, highly specific. It means something. And what it means is that this has never happened before. It means this is the only instance. So, see how successfully, consistently, efficiently have different levels, right? It could be hardly successful or it could be wildly successful. So, it's really subjective versus independently means one. Unprecedented means the first time. So, now you can see how can we keep the highly, highly specific adjectives and adverbs? Yes. Are these the adverbs I see on resumes? Sometimes, but more often than not, I see successfully, consistently, efficiently, and those kinds of really subjective that adjectives and adverbs that can vary widely. And so you want to remove those and replace them with evidence. Okay, enough about adjectives and adverbs. We don't want to hate on them too much, but number two, if an intern can say it, swap it for specifics. So here's a good example: expertise in achieving outstanding project results. Technically, a college intern, early career, high school student, middle school student can actually say that they excel in achieving outstanding projects results. That tells you that it's too vague. It doesn't tell the manager really anything. You know what outstanding project results you have, and so dig that up. What was the result? What was the before and after? What's the best way to showcase that transformation between the before and after? What measures of scope can you include to showcase that this is a complex project with a lot of moving parts and that it impacted a lot of people, or that it had a big budget, or that it was a result of the work of 35 cross functional professionals? So you want to make sure that an intern cannot, or an early, a high school student or whatnot, that they cannot use the same phrase, because then it is going to take your experience that's at a much higher level and it's going to bring it all the way down to that individual, more basic level. All right. So, number three, if on your resume you have all percentages or mostly percentages, you absolutely have to swap at least a couple of them for scope, meaning I don't know what increase by 100% means. Increase by 100% could mean that you were making $1 and tomorrow you made $2. That is a 100% increase, but I have no idea of the complexity or the scope of your work. And so make sure that at least some of your metrics are either, if they're percentages, that you show the raw numbers, or if you've got raw numbers, maybe you want to remove some percentages and put the raw numbers instead, just because you want to make sure and include some scope that they can see very, very, very quickly, because that's what's going to help them to know if you are a good fit for them. So first is figuring out, have they worked at a company as large as ours, or in a similar space as ours, right? They're trying to assess, what are the spaces for growth? Like, what's the space for growth when you look at your resume? And everybody that applies for positions, typically the most successful folks, meet 70% of the requirements, not 100, not 120, 70. That's usually a good space to be in, because when you go for a new position, you typically go one step up. And so if you're applying for jobs that you have 70% of the qualifications for, then chances are you're going to have a little bit of a gap. That is absolutely normal. But they're trying to figure out, what is that gap? Is it that you worked with a slightly smaller organization and you're going to do the same level of work, but now at a higher complexity and a higher level? Or is it that you have worked at this level already, but maybe you have a little bit of a gap in one particular part of the skill set, right? So they're trying to get a sense of that by looking at the scope. And if all they see are percentages, an instant question mark, if not a red flag, is going to pop up. Okay, so number four, if you look at your resume and you have really wordy bullets or a really long summary, chances are it is going to drown out all the good stuff in the middle of a bunch of other words. So what you're looking for is your bullets to be from 12 to 18 words. Ideally, that's been a researched, prime amount of words, is that 12 to 18 words. And also ask yourself, it's not just, oh, 12 to 18 words is the perfect amount of words, so I'm going to stick to 12 to 18 words. No, it's because 12 to 18 words typically does a good job of making sure that every single word is impactful, has a purpose. And so ask yourself, does every single word add value? Every word that's a keyword instantly adds value, right? For search engine optimization, which really, that's what I use the term generally speaking, but really we're talking about that application tracking system and how people can search through resumes by typing in keywords and being able to see what comes up, right? So if the word in the bullet is a keyword, you're in good shape. But there's sometimes an alarmingly large number of words, like, for example, achieve consistently high results. None of those words actually add value. So instead, you want to replace those words with words that add specific and concrete details about what you did, and making sure that every word is literally inextricable from the sentence, so that I have to have this word, whatever that word is. I have to have this word in here, because if I take it out, the sentence no longer makes sense. So it's either one of these like inextricable words, or it's a keyword, or it's a scope, right? So that's what you want to make sure is in your bullets. So avoid the wordy bullets, swap it out for 12 to 18 really impactful words. And then, of course, in your summary, you're doing the same thing. We're not going to stick to 12 to 18 words. We might have maybe as much as twice as that. But if you have a way of breaking that down into 12 to 18 word bullets, awesome. If not, that's okay. If you have a little paragraph up there, that's not a problem. But you just want to make sure that it sounds less like an essay and more like a fact based decision making document. Okay, let's move on now to number five. If you have all your career history, I can't tell you for sure that you have too much on your resume. It's really tough to do that without knowing what role you're interested in and what your career history is. But if you're going to take a pivot, for example, of any kind, chances are you do not need your entire career history on your resume. In fact, if you have more than 10 years of experience, if you're in the US, I can almost guarantee you, you do not need your entire career history in your resume. Now, there's so many different things to look at to answer this question, right? One of the questions is if you have had one position for the last 10 years and you've got two or three positions before that, and that takes you into, the last 15 or even 20 years, you might need that because that way you can show the diversity, you can show a story. But other than that, if you have had multiple roles within the last 10 years, you probably want to focus on that and then maybe minimize the prior experience, assuming that the value of that experience and the relevancy of that experience is not as important to your next role. So, again, there's a lot of decisions that we need to make as we decide what story we're going to tell and what is truly a complete history for that story. But if you're looking at your resume and you're like, everything I ever did was in here, down to that time when I calculated the budget and down to that one time when I answered phones, on a daily basis, right? Think about what is most relevant for my future role. If it is not relevant, we can leave it out. There's going to be so many more opportunities to share the work that you've done. And it's possible that there are things that you have done in your career that you may never share because it's not something that your next employer needs to know in order to be confident that you are the person for the job. And so everything that is outside of what fits neatly in that brand story is actually clutter. So, when you're looking at your career history, swap a full and complete everything but the kitchen sink career history, swap that for the three biggest transformations from each role that is relevant to your next position. That's usually a good rule of thumb. But again, crafting a story is a highly creative process that you want to see the entire picture and all the details before you can really, really say what you're going to remove. So, something to think about. Okay, let's move on to number 6. Number 6. So, if you have a jam packed 2 pages and your font is Times Roman, size 11 or smaller, chances are you need to swap it out for some more breathing room. This reminds me of, do you remember? I'm totally gonna out myself here, but do you remember? At least I'll tell you my story, and then hopefully it resonates with you. But like, I remember when I was in my 20s, we were all trying all these fad diets, right? And one of the things that my friend said, she's like, "Oh, I'm doing Jenny Craig." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, sure." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm doing Jenny Craig." And then 6 months later, she's like, "Nah, I'm not doing it anymore." And I'm like, "Why not? It didn't work for you?" And she's like, "Well, it did at first, but then I learned to cheat the system and I can get everything I wanted to eat, even though it wasn't healthy underneath the right number of points." To be honest, this totally reminds me of the Jenny Craig point system where people are like, I'm gonna throw everything in there in 2 pages. And because the margins are 0.00001, and because the font is a size 9 font that's teeny tiny, and even I need glasses to read it, it's good because it's 2 pages. That's the best principle. And it's 2 pages, right? But instead, what you're looking for is some breathing room. So you want to make sure that when you look at your resume, you can hold it at an arm's length and you can very easily absorb the resume. So it's less about having only 2 pages to read, but more about being able to easily absorb a document. So again, 11-point font, 10-point font. If it's super packed, you probably have too many words. And so now it's going back to that same situation where we're like, okay, let's figure out what's truly important. Let's figure out the best transformations and then remove all the clutter so that when I look at your resume, and not me, but when a hiring leader looks at your resume, they can look at it and actually see you as it relates to the next role. They don't need all the information. They only need what's going to make you shine the most. All right, so that's my number 6, 2 jam-packed pages. Number 7, I hear so often. I used a template and I created my resume and it's still not working. I can tell you, it's not about the style. It's about the words. Now, this is a thing with communications. I remember thinking communications is such an easy major. Do you remember that? Like, I remember when I was in college, oh, engineers have it really tough, which of course they do. Props to my engineers 100%. I have worked with engineers, absolutely love engineers. But on the flip side, I remember Oh, if you want an easy major, you go to communications. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but I'm going to tell you right now, it is actually not as easy as you think. Communications is a very creative, very strategic major. And when your communications, when the words you use require you to have an outcome, all of a sudden communications becomes one of the most difficult majors there are because words have an impact on people. Words make us feel things, and sometimes they're good things like excitement and anticipation to meet a potential employee, employer, employee, etc. But also, words can make us feel a feeling of I'm already bored. This flowery language sounds like a high school essay, and I can't stand it anymore. I cannot read the rest of this resume, right? And so you want to pay attention to the words you use more than the template or the style. And here's the thing, if you're using a template resume, I can't say for sure because I haven't seen your career story, right? It's so rich when you look at a career history and I ask you questions and I get to know of all the great things you've done and find the red thread in your career history. It is so rich that it's impossible for me to know now. But I can tell you, typically about 70% plus of the resumes that are done with a template, the template actually overshadows their career story. You can't actually find the story because the template wasn't made for that story. So here's what I mean. When I put together a resume, I don't actually look at the format at all. If you're a client of mine, you know when I present you with the content draft, it's usually kind of ugly. It's just text. And I don't even care what font it is, right? Because what we're doing is we're trying to figure out what the golden story is, what the Disney story is. And so as we're figuring that out, we then start to figure, oh, for you, highlights are going to be really important because when you look at your diverse career history, you're going to need to paint a picture for the employer of why it is that by having 3 or 4 or 5 different career shifts over the last 10 years, you now are the perfect candidate for this next role. For other people, the career highlights is not really going to be very impactful because maybe for you, you only have 1 or 2 or 3 positions and they all fit within the first page, right? Or they're all very, very similar. And so for you, the highlights might not be nearly as important as maybe a specific set of certificates or a specific set of skill sets that are really highly technical. For some folks, the technical piece is going to be more important. For other people, like for example, I was working with a teacher who worked in multiple districts. She had so many amazing accomplishments, but the bulk of them were in the last or most recent position in her district. So when we put the resume with 3 or 4 or 5 positions and we listed it by position, it looked like she did a really amazing job in one role, and then everything else was kind of a little bit empty. But the reality is that she has these skills no matter what. So to tell her story more powerfully, we actually shifted the resume around a little bit to show the district as one location with multiple assignments. And then instead of putting it by position, we actually put it by skill set. So there's different ways that you can do this to make sure that the candidate stands out and that your story is told in the best way possible while also not creating any red flags. So for example, there's a chronological resume where you put everything in order by date, right? But then there is the functional resume. And if you haven't heard this yet, this is important for you to know, but the functional resume typically raises some red flags. Meaning, if on your resume you don't technically have dates of your positions, but instead you have a large listing of all the skills and they're categorized, right? Your skills and your accomplishments are categorized, but you can't tell what you did in each individual position. It's typically a red flag for employers. So there's only certain situations, and they're fewer and fewer, where a functional resume truly works. You could do a combination resume. So, all of this to say, I was on templates, number 7. I almost lost my place because I went off on a rant. But templates and styling should be the very last thing you think about. I would not purchase a resume template. I would first look at your story, figure out what needs to jump out and what needs to settle into the background, what we need to have on there because it's an expectation, but we don't want to bring emphasis to. And once we figure out all those pieces, then we can start looking at what's the format that's going to be the best for this. What are the margins going to look like to have this either fit into a perfect 2 pages or slightly more spaced out 3 pages? That's actually really easy on the eye. So even though it's 3 pages, it feels so much better than a jam packed 2 page resume. So design should follow content, not the other way around. There's actually a quote. It's so simple. Now you're going to be like, Patricia, I really had to look this up. The quote is, good design is invisible. Good design is invisible. When I think of design originally, I thought of design as like fashion design. And so I was like, oh man, it's got to be a pretty color. It's got to be this like really cool, new, and original thing. And what I've learned, especially designing brands for professionals, is that design should be invisible, meaning you should look at the document. And this goes for really graphic design, et cetera, but we're not there. So we're going to leave that in the graphic design space. But for professional brand, good design means that when I look at something, my eye naturally travels the entire document without even trying. That is good design. So it's not about the color, but it's more about the amount of contrast that's needed to showcase something as more bold and bright or showcase something in a gray color. And so I don't have a lot of color in my resumes, but there's, a little bit of maybe a slightly lighter black or a gray. There might be one, absolute maximum two, but typically we stick with just one color and a gray if we need it. And we use those colors not for style necessarily, but we use those colors to help the eye move faster to one part of the resume and slower to another part of the resume. So, all that to say, templates and style, swap them for a design that pushes the story forward. Okay. We're on to number 8. Let's move on to number 8. So, commoditized language, meaning this is my little word that I made up for duties and responsibilities. Duties and responsibilities are what an employee is asked to do. But my friend, you are not an employee. You are a subject matter expert. You come in as a consultant. You are a company of one. And so your job is to say, I understand X problem. Every single professional solves a problem. This is why you are worth the 70, 100, my gosh, the $70,000, the $100,000, the $150,000. It's because you solve a problem that helps the company to generate more than that in revenue. That's why it's worth it to hire you, because you solve a problem. And so when you use commoditized language on your resume, so this means duties and responsibilities, you are saying, when my employer asked me to do X, I did it. What it should say instead, and you know this already, right? It's accomplishments and results. And so at the very beginning of your bullet, I always put the result. So, for example, instead of saying something like, manage cross functional teams and oversee project execution to ensure timely delivery. You can see there's no metrics in there, there's no result in there. It's basically saying, my boss told me to manage cross functional teams, and my boss told me to oversee project execution, and my boss told me to ensure timely delivery. But I bet you that you did so much more than that. And so your bullet could instead not include generic duties and responsibilities and instead sound a little bit like this: led cross functional teams of 10 plus across marketing, sales, product, and streamlining workflows and increasing project completion rates by 30% within 6 months. So you can see there you've got scope, cross functional teams of 10 plus. You've got some details across marketing, sales, and product. You've got a little bit of an outcome here, streamlining workflows. You've got the outcome metric, which is increasing project completion rates by 30%. And then you also have a time metric within 6 months. Big, 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 big difference there. So you're switching from I was asked to do X and you're moving into here's what I accomplished. All right, number 9. Oh my goodness, I can't believe we're almost done. Number 9, starting with your experience. I see this all the time. Now, this isn't something that you can technically look at your resume and know this person started with their experience, but when you're drafting your resume, I strongly encourage you, don't draft it from scratch in terms of don't, look at your resume and say, okay, what experience do I have at this position? Okay, let me put everything here. What experience do I have in this next position? Okay, let me put everything here. No, instead, typically what I personally do is I start with a blank sheet. And instead, we start with your target role. So I always ask people for 5 to 10 job postings for the one target role they're most interested in. So think about your top 5 to 10 dream job postings, assuming they're all pointing in the same direction. I then review all of those. I do use AI because AI helps us move faster and think more creatively. But the beauty is that you also have to have the knowledge, the expertise, the practice, right? When you use AI to exponentially make it more impactful. So I do use AI to help speed up some of the processes. And so I use AI to put in all 5, 10 different job postings. And I have a specific prompt where I basically, the short of it is that I basically ask it for a synthesized list of outcomes, synthesized list of skill sets, synthesized list of the big challenges that a company could face in this particular space. And so I look at all of these pieces. And as I'm looking at these pieces, I then say, okay, let's now create a document that is specifically for these 5 to 10 postings. And let's only pull from your experience, right? So it's sort of like your experience as a toolkit. And I'm looking at the blueprint, and the blueprint are the 5 to 10 postings, not your career history. So we're trying to do something that's targeted at the 5 to 10 postings, and we're pulling from your toolkit little by little, one piece at a time. Does this apply? What's the best tool I can use for this next role? And that's what you do. So you start with your target role instead of starting with your experience. So that's number 9. Okay, let's do a quick little breakdown here. Number 1, before we do number 10. Number 1 is adjectives and adverb. Swap them for evidence. Number 2, if an intern can say it, swap it for more specific things that only you can say. Number 3, if you have all or mostly percentages as your metrics, it's time to swap some of those out to let your manager know or your future leader know of your scope. If your bullets are really wordy, or if they're words that do not add value to that bullet, then you want to remove some of those words and lean on the 12 to 18 most inextricable words in that particular bullet. Number 5, if you have your complete career history, everything in the kitchen sink, you want to swap it for the 3 biggest transformations from each relevant role. Number 6, if you have 2 jam-packed pages, you have done what we all have tried to do with Jenny Craig. And what you need to do instead is either go into a 3rd page if everything in there is amazing, or take out some of the clutter to get to 2 really easy to read pages. Number 7, you don't want to take a template and then jam yourself into it. You want to create your story, decide on your content, and then choose a template that makes it shine the most. Number 8, avoid the duties and responsibilities type language and swap it for accomplishments, results, and scope. And then, of course, we just talked about number 9, starting with your target role and then pulling from your experience in order to speak directly to that target role. Okay, so number 10. This is the one that I tend to get on my soapbox a little bit because the world is changing very, very quickly. And with it, hiring practices are changing. The traditional methods just do not work anymore. I have heard so many people in the last week alone, let alone the last several months in 2024, but in the last week alone, so many people have said, I have applied to hundreds upon hundreds of jobs and I hear nothing. And every time you apply for a job, either you're doing the easy apply button, and that's not going to get any of us anywhere, right? It's just the reality, easy apply, easy deny. Or you're taking your time and targeting every single resume and writing a whole new cover letter and taking a half hour to apply, right? That is a lot of time when there are hundreds upon hundreds of applications. It is like Black Friday. There's free TVs at Best Buy, and the line is just around the corner. It's just not working anymore. So, all of that to say that number 10, one of the most important things today in this new job search world that 97% of people are missing is a well developed LinkedIn profile. Okay, so here's 3 ways that leaders come to your LinkedIn profile. First, a recruiter is going to search for a particular position, a set of skills. There's a ton of different levers they can pull. So they're going to start searching for folks. When they hit that search button, they're going to get probably hundreds, if not thousands, of accounts from professionals, including yours. And the goal is for you to come up on the very first page, and that takes some search engine optimization. It takes a number of different things on your LinkedIn profile, a whole other episode. But one thing that's really important is that when they see your name, your picture, and your headline, you want all of it to be one appealing package. So that's your first piece there. But when they click on that, they're going to now land on your LinkedIn profile. When they land on your LinkedIn profile, your banner is your visual hook. It's what's going to let them know either default LinkedIn image. I haven't done anything to my LinkedIn. I'm not networking. I don't know. I can't say whether your career is important to you or not. I bet it is, but they don't have anything else to go off of. And so sometimes they make these assumptions that I think could be pretty unfair. But we need to learn how to play the game and then play to win. And so take advantage of that visual hook, which is your banner. That's the first piece. The second way that a hiring leader will get on to see that visual hook is that you would submit an application. And if you submit it to an online job board and you don't have any contacts, chances are not as high, but let's say something happens and miraculously your resume gets through to a hiring leader before they make the decision of, am I going to call you in for an interview or for a screening? They are first going to get more information from you. And that's going to be through your LinkedIn profile. And so sometimes what you can do is when you apply, you can always, and yeah, let's say you're in the middle of a job search right now, every day or every week, take a look at who has viewed your profile and see what companies they're from and if you've applied to any of those companies, because that's a really, really good sign. Then you can always, connect with them, reach out to them. It's really up to you. There's an entire system you can use. That's a second way that managers or hiring leaders are going to land on your profile and see that visual hook. Now, the third way is if you are engaged in LinkedIn, you have a post, you make a comment, or maybe someone refers you, right? For whatever other reason, a hiring leader or even a recruiter hears about you and they're curious and they're like, let me invest a minute, 6 seconds, a minute, minute and a half, and take a look at their profile and just see what's up. They're going to click on your profile, and within seconds, they are going to have a feeling. It's slight. It's not like anger or love, but it will be a feeling of, I've seen this before. It's the same default image everybody else has, right? So just know your LinkedIn account for those three reasons that we talked about is now more important than your resume, because that long line at Best Buy, how everyone's mass applying to online job boards when you have no contact, that's getting longer and longer and longer. And I actually heard of it described as a complete bloodbath. That is a dire description, but in this market this year after 2024, it's not looking any better. Companies are laying people off left and right. There's so many people who need to get hired, and not only just sooner than later, but they need to get hired like yesterday. Like you probably need to get hired yesterday, right? So getting in line at the very, very back is just not going to work anymore. And so this is where your LinkedIn account has so much potential. And for 97 out of 100 of you, it's just not being used. And so I implore you to, log onto your LinkedIn account and see what image you have in your banner and see what your headline says and try your best optimizing it. I know sometimes you are like, I don't really know how to do it, or I don't really know, like, I'm trying, I just heard about 9 things, right, that I need to fix on my resume. So how am I going to do on my LinkedIn? Use the same practices, but if you're in the US, go ahead and reach out to me on LinkedIn. And so long, I spend a couple of hours a day, maybe an hour, maybe not a couple, like an hour a day, helping people with this. And I reach out to people and I'm like, hey, I see you're looking for a job. I know exactly what you need to do to improve your LinkedIn. And I'm going to take at least 5 minutes, 6, 7 minutes to give you a video review of your LinkedIn so you can at least make a few little steps, right? That's not going to be like everything that you need in order to get hired, but I just want to at least get you started. So if you're in the United States and you want me to provide you with the mini LinkedIn review, just connect with me. Let me know that you listened to me on the podcast and that you like your review, and I'm more than happy to do it for you. All right, I'm going to leave you with that because I think I've gone on for too long. If this episode was exactly what you needed, then guess what? Episode number 2, which literally, yes, it is our second episode ever. Episode number 2 is on the 3 time-wasting tasks to ditch so that you can accelerate your job search. One of them has to do with resume. I'm going to tell you right now, but the goal is that you use some of the information you learned from today to elevate your resume, to get it to where it needs to be. And then don't spend too much more time on that resume. Once it's in good shape, it becomes a master, and then you spend most of your time on your networking. Anyway, listen to both today's episode. Thank you very much. You're already done here. And episode number 2. And that's going to help you get your resume in order and then avoid the time-sucking traps that come in after. I'm going to go ahead and link it in the description for you. Now, finally, if you're thinking, listen, Patricia, I do not have time for any of this. I love listening to this, but am I going to go home and do it tonight? Probably not. Now, listen, if you're thinking, can you just tell me why specifically I am not getting any callbacks and what I can do specifically to elevate my story or to, continue to move forward in the job search? If that's you, then grab a space on my calendar for a diagnostic career strategy hour. It's really a power hour. And what will happen is you'll send me your materials. You and I will meet for 50 minutes. I will have already reviewed your materials and prepped some feedback for you. And in that 50 minutes that you and I meet, we will pinpoint the issue and touch on your specific strategy, start to finish. And I'm going to give you a roadmap for your job search, some key things you need to do at each point so that you stand out. Because in communications, right, you are looking at the law of recency. You need to make sure that you are the most recent and the person that stands out at every point. Because when you get to the interview, they already forgot the extra thing you did when you first applied. When you get to negotiations, they already forgot that extra thing you did in your first interview, right? And so I'm going to give you a roadmap that will help you to stand out at every single step of the way. And I'll also give you a checklist of immediate next steps. And of course, the recording from your call and some value-packed resources that we talk about on our call. Now, this is a really great way to get a taste of coaching and a much lower cost way if you want to experience a little introduction to our full coaching program in case you decide to move in that direction. Anyhow, I'll leave the link to that. It's called a Diagnostic and Strategy Power Hour. I am so glad that you and I got a chance to talk today. I hope this has been helpful. Again, I hope it has been inspiring. Know that we love you. We're cheering you on. We're praying for you, and we'll see you on the next one. Hey, thanks for listening. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. If you found this episode helpful, please tap the 5-star review on the show's homepage in your podcast app. It would absolutely make my day, and it helps others discover the Uncommon Career Podcast. Now, to download your free career resources and learn how I help seasoned professionals land amazing offers in as little as 90 days, click on the link in the description or go to theuncommoncareer.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.